Alright, so today we're going to do a real basic, smoke effect, like a tendril of smoke for a cigarette. I'm going to be using Adobe Flash CS3, although this basic approach will probably work in any version of Flash. It's not going to be too complicated. And it's going to be a pretty simple animation. There's a lot of different ways you can do smoke. This is going to be the most basic beginner's kind of way. Once you sort of figure it out, you can adapt it to do different styles of motion and stuff. But today, this is just going to be a real simple wave. So what you want, pretty much, first of all, so we got a hand here holding a cigarette. That's just how I prefer to draw a hand holding a cigarette. You can draw it any way you like. It doesn't really matter, but we'll take a closer look at that later. Important thing is you know where your smoke is going to be beginning and where it's going to be coming from. And for this example, I'm going to do it right here. So we're going to want like a little thing like that, right? The basic shape of a smoke, right? So maybe something more like this. Okay, that's going to be kind of the way, kind of the general shape of it. So you know, let's get started. Zoom in a little bit. You never want to work zoomed out too much. No point. You want to be able to get right in here and control. You know, you don't want your lines too fucked up. You know. Anyway, so we'll start with like a bit of a wave, just like an S kind of pattern. Okay, see that's about right. It's nice and even. You got this even ass curve here. So once we do that, go ahead and make that line into a symbol. Okay, now I would normally, for most animation stuff, you would use a graphic, but because you're going to want to put a little effect on this, and you're going to want this to be something that will loop constantly independently of what else is going on, I think a movie clip would be more appropriate. A lot of people will tell you, hey, graphics are for animation, movie clips are for programming. True, but not always true. You tell those hacks to shut the fuck up. Sometimes a movie clip is also for animation. This is one of those times. So once you made that the symbol, get your ass in there. And so now we got the first keyframe is this smoke shape, okay? And so then what you're gonna want to do after that is the second keyframe is gonna basically be, you know, the opposite of that, but it's got to start at the same point. Okay, all these frames, you can make a little extra layer here to keep track of it for yourself. Here's the starting point. Okay, it's gonna be this circle. All right, and maybe now once we've established that, we can center this a little better on the tip of the cigarette. Okay, so you put that little targeting circle on another layer, and you lock that off so it doesn't get in the way. All right, so now you got that starting there. Keyframe 1, and then we'll do keyframe 2, and this matters about as much, that you get these two, you know, these two are equally important, and then everything else kind of animates between them. So we'll go, you get the reverse, okay? Yeah, that's good enough, fuck it. The next thing to do, now that we got those, is you're going to want to find the halfway point, you know, the frame between the two. So first of all, I'm using the pencil tool. You could use the paintbrush tool if you prefer, but because this is just going to be like a single shape with one flat color, there's not a lot of reason to do outlines, and with the pencil tool you can at least you can see what the contour is without being sort of deceived by the line weight of you know, the brush if you're doing it that way. I like to use the hairline setting on the pencil, because that way it stays as thin as it can be no matter how much you zoom in. It's just the actual you know, the vector line. So alright, so now that we got these two, you just use the onion skin. Now this is where some people, you know, there's a wave motion. This kind of wave motion is like a particular, like it's a wave that moves in a direction, right? Sometimes I've seen people do it where they fuck it up, where they go like, okay, so these things are all this far apart, right? So what's the halfway point between them? Like, as if you would like sort of, you know, start to do it more gradually, right? Like you'd grade between like this or some shit. And then what you end up with there is like this kind of motion. That's wrong. That's fucked up. That's not how come on, that's not how smoke moves. We know this. You've seen smoke in real life. You're not a baby. Okay? So what you want to do instead is you look at like this kind of lump over here. First of all, you establish which one's first. Let's keep in mind. This one's first. So we're going to have like these fucking bumps like this moving upwards. Okay? So all these bumps, they go up like this. Every time there's like a, you know, a spot on the wave that juts out, that spot, just remember these things are going to be moving upwards in every frame until it loops. So keeping track of that, you got this one first. Okay, that's first. So okay, that means that this one, which we established was first, becomes this one. And so what we need is like you know, the one we draw now has to be in between the two, in between that motion, right? So here's what we'll do. That's about right. And now you got to remember, because of this starting point, it's got to originate from there. So what we'll do is start there, and now, right? Okay, so see how that works. The problem is now you gotta keep that rhythm going. So it's got to be the same thing, one smooth kind of motion where every sticky outy humpy bit moves upwards. So let's do that shit right now. Let's see if we can do it in one move. That's not bad. It's a little rough over here, but I think that the positioning is basically right. So you're going to end up with every spot where there's an intersection between the two keyframes, the first one and the second one, is where the next one should be, because this is like a straight up in between, right? So you get 1, 2, 3, right? Now see, look at these. This seems to be moving upwards. All right, great. Great job. You did it, if that's what you did. Okay, so next, now we got these other two in-betweens here, right? We want to make it a little smoother, so we just add more of this shit. So once again, starting with this is the first one. It's going to be this next one up here. Okay, so right in between, you do it again. Like Britney Spears, right? Right? Oops, you did it. There you go. Oops, I did it again. This one is tucked in a little bit. That's a little too far in. And this one sticks out a little much for it to be smooth, but that's kind of okay. What you don't want is, I don't know. I don't like it gets a little flat, so we'll just stretch that bitch. I mean, that sounds rude. We'll you know what I mean. In a PG-13 kind of way, we'll okay. Anyway, get rid of these fucking arrows. You don't need these arrows, you know. That was just for demonstrations only. Arrows are for demonstrations. So, all right. We want to clean this up a little bit. We're going to keep the reason we want to keep these pencil lines relatively clean is because afterwards we're going to fill it in. I'm going to tidy this up a bit more. That's a bit janky. Okay. Should be smoother. Should also be right in between. Like you see, you got these two lines here. Should kind of be in the middle of them. If you want a smooth motion. Sometimes you don't want a smooth motion. Sometimes you want one that's a bit jagged, you know, for different effects. That's cool, but we're not, you know, you can fuck around with that later once you kind of get this motion right. You know what I mean? Okay. So next, we're just going to do that same thing again. All right. So in this situation, here's the first, right? And then here's the second. Wait, what the fuck? See, it's easy to get a bit lost if you're not paying attention. And I thought I was. So here we go. We're going to want this. Here's where we're going, in between right here. Right? So here's, we'll focus based on these ones that are higher up. So this is where it should be. So span through, right? You just try and weave your way through the middle of like this kind of bizarro helix thing and get... That's kind of good enough. This is a bit it curves a bit too steeply at the top on this one, but we can let that be. Fuck it, whatever. Okay, so now see, not bad, right? So you want to do that same thing again. So we'll take that first one that we did and put it over here. So now we're doing the same motion, but pretty much in reverse. We're starting with the first keyframe. We're starting with the second keyframe and going back into the first one, because you can't just flip them around or you'll have a thing that goes up and down like this. You got to keep, it's got to go straight through. So next thing you do, all right, is whatever. You know where this is going. So here we go. First, it's got to go into this, right? There it is. So if we're going to go right in between those two, we've still got to start at this point that we've established. But now, you know, what's it going to be? It's going to be like that, okay? Whew. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's not bad. So I guess now we just, you know, just keep at it. If you get the point, you can fast forward through this bit. I'm just going to kind of get these all because the very tip of it is going to be hidden behind the cigarette. It doesn't need to completely intersect cleanly. It's, of course, it's helpful if it does. It's better if it does, but if it doesn't, I mean, that's whatever. It's not the end of the world. It's not the most important thing. The most important thing, I think, is where, you know, getting these intersections correct and making this a little smooth. Yeah. God. Okay, that's a bit of a lump. We just want it to be like a wave. Oh. Okay, good enough. And if it gets too jagged, if it looks like there's, you know, parts that are all, you know, bumpy, like too many points, you can just select the whole thing, Shift Control Alt C, and then smooth it out. You get a little bit, you know, for something like this, you shouldn't lose any important detail. It should just kind of clean it up a little bit if it needs it. Okay, so now we got this. Get these arrows out of here, right? So we should actually also be doing this on 2s. There's no reason it should be on 1s. It's going to be way too fast. We're doing 24 frames a second or 30 frames a second. These should be on 2s. If you want it to be slower and smoother, just add more of these in-betweens, like we've been doing. It gets tighter and tighter every time you want to add one, so the more you add, the harder it's going to be to kind of not have something popping out where it shouldn't be. But for the you know, just for the simple cycle like this, 1, 2, you know, 8 frames will pretty much do it for a loop like this. Okay, so now that we got this one, we're gonna do another one that matches on the other side. So the way I would do this, the way we're gonna do it right now, is I would do it on another layer so that we can kind of tweak that one without interfering with the one that we already have, right? So let's start again. Same anchor point. That's not the proper term for this, but same, you know, the beginning point that we set up, that's where you want that to go. And then this shit, this part kind of, you can jam on it a little, depends. This is where you can kind of decide how wide you want it to be, you know, some other details, but pretty much you just want it to go the same, right? So make sure that these cross. because that way we can fill it in more easily after. So it can be a slightly different shape, like this is a little wider up here than it is down here, but that's okay, I'll give it a little bit of character, you know. Again, what's important is that the next keyframe be a good opposite, and let's see if we can get that to work well here. So we can always use, if you get confused with which line is which, always just pop these wireframes, differentiate the colors. You can see we're working on better sometimes that way. So for the time being, see, we just want to do the opposite of the, not the green one, but this grayed out other one. So this might end up looking a little wonky, you know, if you don't, this one will have a little more dynamics to it, I think, because it's going to need to stick out differently in some spots. So that could be interesting. Let's see how it goes. So here we go, position 1 and position 2, like before. Fuck. Okay. So once again, you want to hit that in between. Let's see. Mark the lower, and then mark where it goes to. See, so this is going to be kind of a little more extreme. What? Once again, a little weird, like I said, something like this, but I think it'll pretty much be, yeah, it's about right. Yeah. We're trying to get it to intersect in the top here, so we may have to make some, improvise a little bit. I think that'll... Now see, there's a problem right here. You don't want this just straight through. That's going to make it strange. I think that could do it. Let's quickly do these and see if it turns out. Get this guy out of here. See, this one sticks out a bit far. Yeah, that'll do. Alright, same thing over here. Just that onion skin, you just want to see, you know, the two beside each other, otherwise this shit's gonna get confusing if you see too many at once. It can get confusing really quickly. If you lose track of what you're looking at, you can get into some bullshit. And yeah, if you're having trouble starting from the bottom, if it's weird when you begin at the bottom, like if you start to lose track of where you are, what you should be doing, just start at the top and go down and see. And sometimes that'll make things clearer. A little change of approach. Another thing to remember is working at this size, this thing, you know, keep it big on the screen, and you can see all the little problems. Then when you zoom out, you know, if you fix most of what you can see at this zoom, at this size, then it's a lot easier. I mean, once you zoom out, it just looks better. There's less to worry about, less to fix. So okay. Whew. Now we do the same thing again, right? Take that first keyframe, put it in the end, and now we're looking through. All right. I guess. Right. Sometimes it's tricky, you know, as I keep saying, to figure out exactly I feel like that's wrong. Let's see. Fuck. Well, it should be, when in doubt, it should also, you know, continue this motion that it has with this one. It should be kind of in parallel, so you should never get these, you should never suddenly switch to this weird hourglass thing. It should always be like two sort of, what do they call it? Tandem, I guess. Weird. Why would that be? Yeah, that's not right. There we go. Yep. Okay. See, yeah, sometimes you gotta start from a different point to figure it out. Sometimes you have to have a better teacher than me to guide you smoothly. This is such a super basic motion, but I think it's an important one to practice and internalize. As you can see, I'm not 100% on it at every moment, but like the general idea of it, it's a really useful one to know. That Goldeen that I did in that Pokemon video was like a million of these little wavy motions. So in that one video I kind of learned how to do it, and then I got a lot of practice. So I'm still, I mean, it's not like I don't do this super often, but it's like one of those, I guess, bicycle type situations. Once it clicks in your head, it's easy to come back to once you sort of, you know what I fucking mean. Fuck. Oh, that's okay. I think that'll kind of do it. A little weird on the bottom. Bottom one's kind of strange. Oh, that's fine. That'll be fine. And then last one here brings it back to the beginning. Yeah. Almost. See, the other thing that makes it tricky is that you're trying to get it to taper to a point on each end. If it was just a long, if it was just a long continuous thing like that, then it would be easy. You just kind of, slide it along halfway between, and then you can kind of fill in the rest. But since it has to come to a point, it's a bit tricky because you want to, this one's a bit bumpy. Alright, so pretty much that's the last thing we want to do here is we've taken these two frames from the beginning and put them at the end for reference, but you don't want them to actually stay there because then that frame will hold for too long. So you can do one of two things. You can either make the first and the last one frame each. I prefer to just remove the last one entirely. And then here we go. We got this kind of thing. It's sort of working. So now what do? Well, take each one of these and you got to put them together. So cut and then Control-Shift-V to paste in place on the next layer down. Go through, just do that to each one. Control-X, Control-Shift-V. Alright, so now that they're all there, just go through every frame and make sure they're all deselected. Just, you know, use the pointer tool to select the blank canvas, make sure they're all flattened into one thing. And then we'll go and we'll just pick a color. It doesn't matter that much because we just want to make sure the shape's there first. So I'm going to go with this obnoxious ass maroon or whatever. So just boom, go through. So, you know, and some of these they might not connect at the points, but you can just drag and make sure that the shape is closed. Okay. Like I said, it's not tremendously important what the point looks like at the bottom, because it's going to be hidden. So once we do that, you can either double-click the lines and delete, or if you want to make sure, you know, that if there's some that are disconnected, the other way to do it is to select the shape, select the pencil color tool on the side here, and then go over to this little white square with the line through it, and then that will delete the pencil. But if it's pretty tight formation like this, you can just tap and delete, you know, tap and delete, and you can do that with this arrow I left behind too. Okay. Double click and delete. Double click and delete. Okay, so now you got this thing, right? It's a bit weird in some spots, but that's okay. For safety's sake, because we like to keep it safe, select each shape. We're going to go through frame by frame, and Control-Shift-Alt-C. That'll give you your optimize. Just go through and optimize each one. It'll take some of the bumpiness out if there's any bumpiness. There probably will be if you're using the pencil tool, you know. And this would be a touchy process if you're doing something with a lot more line and detail. This is just a basic ass shape, so even if it removes a lot of points, it shouldn't change too much about how it actually looks. Pretty safe to just kind of go through without even really checking on a shape like this. Alright, so now we got our 8 frames. This thing, if you want to check the motion without having to make a, you know, do a test movie or something, just change it back to a graphic and make it loop, and then we can watch it zoomed out. There you go. Okay, there's some problems up here, you know, that could be addressed. There are a few things popping out. We won't worry about making that perfect, but if you wanted to, you could go through and make sure that every, you know, put it on wireframe, and then just kind of look and see what are we losing here, what's going on. See, the change between these two frames is a bit weird. Yeah, I would say perhaps... Well, I won't worry about that now, but I'll do this quickly and see if it helps. You know, fill that out a little bit at the top. It was looking like... yeah. Okay, well, for this, the top isn't going to matter that much either, because we just want to make sure this is kind of working. Sort of. Like, see, it thins out on this frame a little bit too much. Something that might be worth considering fixing, but once again, who gives a shit for this for the time being. Take the transform point, select it with the Q, or the hotkey Q, a free transform tool. Take the transform point and move it down to the tip right there, so that if you're rotating it or pivoting it, you know, it's going to be relative to the tip of that cigarette. We won't need to do that yet, but actually, when you change to a movie clip again, it resets the transform point. So anyway, just double check if you're going to be doing that. Make sure it's, you know, right there. So then if it's too big, if you think that's a bit too big, you can resize it, and it will resize relative to that point, which is one of the reasons that's good. Okay, so now here's the thing that I think is going to make this more like a smoke, is that you got to go and select your color. I usually go with linear gradient, okay? So take like a mid-gray, any kind of mid-gray. Like a lighter gray would be nice, but it's not super important. It matters relative to the background that this is going to be on, but there are always things you can do to change that, so it's not too big a deal. So make sure that you got your gradient, it's the same gray on both ends, and then what you want to do is you want to make one zero opacity, one end zero opacity, okay? So then, you know, normally you can control the opacity overall with the alpha setting of the symbol, you know, out here. What's it going to be? You know, you can just use the alpha thing down here to change the overall. So you could potentially leave the other end of this gradient scale on 100%, but I like to, you know, I'll do a little bit here just so relative to the polar ends of it, it's not such a crazy difference. So now you see what the idea is here. So fill it in. Wow. Now take the you know, the gradient control and make sure that stretch it the full span, but make sure that the you know, you might lose sight of it if it's graded out, but make sure that you know, the end of it, so that the appearance, it kind of trails off a little bit, right? So there you go, there's your smoke. So what you want to do now is make sure, use the dropper, pick that up, make sure your gradient over here, make sure it's locked. That's the shit you want to do. Lock it up, because now we're going to go through and each frame do the same one. If the gradient is locked, it'll keep the same fade, right? So there you go, there's a smoke, and then you can come back out and look at that, wowee, look at that smoke. But now it's a movie clip, okay, there's one more thing you can do. It's going to make it look nice. You go in the filters here, and then you pop a blur filter, which you can only do if it's a movie clip. That's the other reason we want to keep it a movie clip, so it loops perpetually, and also you can put a filter on it. Now 5 is a bit much. You don't want to go overboard. It's going to look hackish, but you know, usually you want to go with a minimum 3, and now it's going to be relative to the size of the finished flash. So I mean, take a look at it and see what you think. 3 might be good. 4 perhaps. Do a little control enter test movie and see. Okay. Alright, so you know, the smoke moves a bit fast in my opinion. I'm going to slow the frame rate of the movie down, but otherwise normally you might put more frames or hold the frames for longer. I think holding them on 3s is going to have a bit of a choppy effect, so I would normally, personally, I would put more frames if I wanted to slow that down rather than just holding the frames for longer. But, see, there you go. So on 24 frames per second, it's a bit more reasonable. So now that we've got this thing in the hand, what happens if you want to move the hand around with the cigarette in it? A thing that might seem tempting to do is to take that smoke and then go into the cigarette symbol and plop the smoke right there. But you know what's going to happen if you do that? Let me tell you, is now that the smoke is nested inside the cigarette, if you tilt the cigarette around, oh, look what's going to happen. Oh, now the smoke goes sideways. That's, you know, that's not going to cut it. So what we do instead, don't do that. Instead, just keep it, you know, over here where the transform point, where we put it down at the bottom. And so now you can, for example, you can tween these guys if you want to. So you could have this hand kind of go like, you know, so let's take a look. Position B with this hand, right? Okay. I'm gonna keep this smoke upright. go. Make sure the smoke stays upright and make sure it stays on the center there. And so now you can take, you know, position A, position B, like this. You can do like a long tween, like a 10 frame tween or something. Okay, and you can have a slow. I would ease it out and see what we get here. You know, that looks whatever as it is, but then show that. Let's look at that in a movie. I mean, let's see it in action with the smoke moving. Do one back in the other direction too, so that it'll loop nicely. Okay, so see, there you go. Smoke stays upright, even though the position changes. We could even get a little more ambitious with it. Tilt the cigarette down more, right? But then keep that smoke right on point. Inadvertently, you should actually get rid of this little thing that we used to note where the point was, but you can keep that in there if it's helpful when looking at it, trying to position it, right? So another thing you can do, advanced positioning technique, is put another one like right here, okay, on this. Go into your pencil tool, take any color, doesn't matter at all what color it is, of the pencil. Draw a little thing to know where the position is, and then make the alpha on it 0. I like to make a little, make it a group too, just so it's not, you know, so you can get rid of it with one touch if you ever want to. But so now it's on there, it's invisible. What's the point of that? Well, if you look at the wireframe, you can kind of see it there, see? So if you really wanted to get really meticulous, you could look at the wireframes on both and make sure that these positions line up. And so then you can make sure that no matter where they are, the two circles that we've drawn here line up, right? All right. All right, let's take a look. There you go. And then, you know, again, the smaller it is, I mean, something like this, you wouldn't really, it's not going to be the forefront of the detail. If it is, you probably want to do a more careful job, make it a little more interesting. But this is a little side detail you can kind of have going on in the background. Let's cut all these frames. Insert a new symbol, just call it smoking hand, you know, whatever, and then paste all these frames in here, okay? There you go. Now you can take that smoking hand, you're going to want this to be a graphic, probably. Loop it, and so now it's on the main timeline, and you can fuck with the size of it. So if you want this to be a little smaller, see how it looks, you know, and kind of show like this, see? It's a little smaller. That's not animating properly, but even though something's wrong with the graphic animation, look, the smoke's still going. So the smoke will go no matter what. So let's take another look at this. What did I do wrong? Oh, single frame. See down here. Make sure this loops. I don't know. I don't know what happened. All right. Great. And now I noticed it seems like the fade on this wasn't super complete, so I'll just tweak that a little bit. Move the fade down further so that we don't see the end of the smoke. And you can also do other stuff if you know, once you do this, once you have this finished, you can do things like stretch it out. Maybe you want it to go super long, but if you do that, notice that it will seem to go super fast because it's been stretched out. It will seem to go faster. You can make it longer, you know, like that. You can make it thin if you want to make it thin, just by stretching it around. So a lot of flexibility with a pretty simple like sort of little animated cycle there. And now, you know, if you wanted to, we just did one looping of this, but you could, if you wanted to, make it loop a few times a few different ways, like make the animation like 16 frames, 24 frames, whatever, with different shaped smoke sort of tendrils coming out. Anyway, I don't know. This took longer than I thought, but okay, bye.